are handcuffed. And that's what happened last night.
The police kicked in the door, shot him twice in the chest, and died.
Before you knew it, we had 500 families. We had over 100 volunteers calling us. We were on the phone constantly.
And I can't get it. And I got one police department telling me they don't know who's in charge. I got another police department here. Everybody's got a gun and nobody knows who's in charge. Did anybody figure out who's in charge yet? Is there anybody in charge here? Any police officer in charge? Are you in charge? I can't find anybody in charge. That's the problem.
Good evening, everybody. I am back. Feels like it's been a long time. I only took 1 week off, but it feels like, I don't know, it feels like months. We didn't do the Idavox report last night. And, I got to thank, of course, Christian Perez, who's going to be here co-hosting with me in just a couple of minutes. We're going to get into the show. Leah, our staff writer, and of course, all our editorial board members, Felicia and Herb and Pat, and oh my God, there's almost like 30 of them now, something like that. I don't know. It's pretty amazing to be supported by such an amazing group of people. They contribute on a monthly basis, and also they've been creating shows with me. They've been messaging me, getting behind the scenes. We have little meetings and stuff, and Felicia is now doing a monthly anti-capitalist movie review. That's going to be coming up at the end of the month. We're going to watch a movie called, where is it? White Tiger, something like that. Is it called White Tiger? I forgot. But we're going to be doing that every month. And that's a result of our editorial board. That's a result of grassroots media at work. All right. Because if you're looking at me right now, you could tell that I'm not like a corporate executive. And I certainly don't have millions of dollars in the bank. Hey, Liberia, thanks for checking in. We are basically powered by a group of people that want to do something different outside the establishment. So that's what our editorial board is. So thanks to them, and thanks to you for tuning into NJRR Live. My name is Brian Powers. I come at you every Wednesday night, and we talk about grassroots activism. We get into politics. We also bring in artists, musicians, poets, all kinds of stuff. The theme of our network and this show is art and activism. And, we're trying to make it happen. So thanks for your support tonight. We'll be talking to Tiffany Kaszuba out of New Jersey, NJ Violet activist. And she's got a story that I can relate to quite a bit, because having seen even some of the people she's talking about and had to deal with, I'm familiar with them. So it's not only a personally relatable story for those of us that have gotten into activism and politics and stuff like that, but I think it really shows you why people are so frustrated, and the nuts and bolts of how the system works when people are trying to change it. We're going to get into that. I've been trying to figure out why I get frustrated, personally, as a way to try to talk to others that I organize with about being frustrated, because every organizer and everybody out there working for social change probably experiences more frustration than they do rewarding periods. We probably spend more time getting ready to lose or getting our ass kicked than actually celebrating a victory. But there's been moments of great victories. I mean, I've celebrated a number of, I think, not maybe celebrated, but been really happy to see gay marriage, and marriage equality come through the Supreme Court, even though we haven't completely eradicated, discrimination against everybody. I thought that was a huge step forward, and that was a victory, and I've always appreciated from the ACT UP days. I had an uncle who I love. I was very young when he passed, but he passed away at 27 of AIDS early on in the crisis. And so seeing that activism, and knowing the timeline of how that activism led up to that victory and all the sacrifice that went into it really, really moves me. And it still moves me to this day. And I wonder how to replicate that tremendous change and how we can maybe do things like what's happened with, great leaps forward in civil rights or against discrimination in things like, Medicare for all and getting rid of this capitalist system kind of as a whole. And the reason why it's hard is people are just hard to change. And if you've had personal experience as an organizer or as a counselor or in any kind of position where you've tried to change somebody's mind or try to get them to think differently about a subject, it's really, really difficult. And I think that's because we just kind of allow ourselves to get dug in. The social media bubble is a lot to do with this. But it's just generally more comfortable for people to stay in their wheelhouse and do only the things that they're doing every day over and over again. And as you get older, this gets harder and harder to do. It's harder and harder to break routines or to even think differently than you've thought in the past. And that's really, when we talk about getting rid of racism, abolishing the police, stopping sexual harassment, ending rape culture, and all these kinds of big steps forward that we want to have, we're talking about getting people to act and think differently than they have their whole lives and how they've been groomed by our society to act. If you've ever had a conversation with a Trumper, you tell me how successful you are in changing their mind. Probably not too successful. Doing that on a mass scale takes a society's effort. And it takes, a better education system. And it takes a whole host of things in general, but I boil it down to a different kind of culture. And what I like for you to do, and what I'm trying to do is I just turned 4 years old. And, I'm not, as everybody else, not getting any younger. I started to look into ways to exercise my brain and to reach out and to stay outside my comfort zone. Because the tendency is, as you stay in your comfort zone more, you get stuck in your comfort zone more. And the more you stay outside your comfort zone, the more you push yourself intellectually, either by taking in different podcasts, taking in a different movie every once in a while, and or getting out and doing different activities. There's a lot of ways to do that, but that and helping others around you experience kind of a bit of a diverse life, that's going to help, I think, our society as a whole. And so that's kind of what I've taken over the last couple of weeks. I've taken in a lot of different podcasts, and I've tried to just take in different media. I don't get to read as much as I'd like to. I have too many kids, and I'm trying to build a farm up here in Maine. So I don't get to sit down with a book, but I can pop some earbuds in while I rake a lawn or work a shovel and listen to a podcast. So I've been taking in different podcasts, and I do have to thank our editorial board, Belisha, for, coming up with this movie of the month. Because now I'm forced to watch a movie. And she even said, well, here's the movie. Is this what you want to do? What do you think of it? And I was like, I don't care. You tell me what to do, because I just need somebody to break my own schemas here and get me thinking differently. So those are just a couple of things that I've tried to do. Share your thoughts with us and let us know. I would love, and I see we got some good viewers tonight. I'm seeing people watch. I can see all the different streams. We got about 20 viewers coming in right now. So thanks for tuning in and watching us on Revolution Radio. I know most of us are, anti-capitalist revolutionaries and stuff like that. I don't know if all of us will describe ourselves as Marxists, but it's certainly undeniable that Karl Marx has had, just a tremendous effect on the world we live in today. Whether you're a Marxist, the evolution from Marxist writings, from his op-eds in the New York Times to his correspondence with Abraham Lincoln to, the Communist Manifesto, which he and Engels are so famous for, to the absolutely unreadable Capital, Das Kapital, which I've never been able to get through much of and pretend to understand a lot of it. But he's certainly been an influence on global politics and economics, and probably one of the problems with America, I think, is we don't get outside of our comfort zone when we talk about economics, and we refuse to discuss in both political and education circles the influence of Karl Marx. And that's why I'm going to bring in our professor, because he's not afraid to discuss such wonderful things with you here, our audience. Christian Perez, how are you, brother?
Doing great, Brian. How you doing tonight?
All right, man. All right. So happy birthday, Karl.
Yeah, happy birthday, Karl Marx. I mean, I'm going to be honest and say that I've probably read more actual Marxists than actual Marx writings. And what you said about Capital being unreadable, I've never read Capital, and I don't know if I ever plan to. What I did get was the old-fashioned graphic Marx's Capital for beginners, for dum-dums like me. So this is fun. Perfect. It's the graphic one. It's probably the most intensive, like, graphic reader I've ever read, and I have a number of these. But yeah, I mean, in terms of Karl Marx and his importance, I mean, we have to stop. I mean, I'm a little bit younger than you, Brian. Not that I'm necessarily a young man, but I was born in the early '80s, and I remember coming of age during the tail end of the Cold War, right? And I think a lot of young people today, I mean, and we say young people, I mean, these are people 30 years old and younger. They were born after the fall of the Cold War, right? They don't realize how omnipresent socialism, quote unquote, was all over the world. And at one point, the socialist, quote unquote, countries were about a third of the countries on this planet. And obviously, we have our critiques of the Soviet Union and China, and we can talk about that. But in reality, these are countries that pulled people out of poverty, that pulled people out of ages, that pulled people out of ignorance and superstition, and built a new world, right? I will criticize Joseph Stalin. I will criticize Mao Zedong, but these are people that took medieval countries, medieval states, and turned them into modern world powers. Well, not necessarily Mao. It took a couple more years for China, but with the Soviet Union, we're talking in one generation, Russia went from just a medieval state. Russia got rid of serfdom in the 1860s. That's the same time the United States gave up slavery. So we're talking in one generation, the Soviet Union, or Russia, Eastern Europe, went from just outside the Middle Ages to the century, developing vaccines, the space race, and that's on one hand. I mean, we can definitely say that these states weren't socialist because they weren't democratic, and I agree with that. Again, this idea of economic democracy, being pro-union, being in favor of workers, we can thank Karl Marx for that. He wasn't the first communist, but he was the first prominent communist. Or he wasn't the first socialist. He was the first prominent socialist, and that's why they called themselves.
The word, I mean, he was the one that defined. I think he and Engels, defined communism with the manifesto at the. I can't remember the name of the prior organization, but when they took over, essentially what was a rabble groups of both anarchists and communists, and forced the Communist Manifesto to be adopted as this global kind of policy. And when we talk about, this state failed, China failed, this failed, it's not communists and socialists, we will argue with each other over basically history and who did what forever. But what I've always seen is not necessarily whether these states can be defined currently as communist or not. And that's always argued about China, North Korea, all these self-defined communist states. But people will say, well, these are, in the case of North Korea, either a dictatorship, a dynastical dictatorship in the case of North Korea, or in China, the case where you could make the argument they're very much they become a free market, not a free market, but a capitalist system, with these principles in it. That's all well and good to discuss, but it's also a separate argument as we develop communist thought and we talk about literature, right? So Marx gets the ball rolling with the manifesto and his later works with Engels. But then you look at Mao's writings and my personal favorite communist writing of all time, Combat Liberalism, and the definition. So, and another example might be Marx's definition of both the bourgeois and the proletariat, Whereas Mao breaks the proletariat down into lumpen proletariat and talks about how small business owners are part of the proletariat. So there's not this kind of black and white, us versus them Marxism in Maoism, but it's a much more kind of a better descriptive definition of life under the feudal system and the kind of toxic traits that Mao was combating as he fought, that revolution. Wherever you fall on the side of whether he was a good guy or not, I've always been on the side. I don't know many world leaders have been good people. So.
Well, yeah, I mean, for me, like I'm not a Mao scholar, so like I really don't know a lot about Mao. But again, I mean, China, it wasn't just going to be. It's like this is what people don't understand. China's not going to be around for thousands of years. Have all these emperors, kings, have all these foreign countries carve up their country like a pie, not have like a modern infrastructure, and then just jump into democracy. That's not going to happen. That's not going to happen anywhere, right? So, I mean, it's if the Chinese Communist Party comes to power, the thing they want is democracy. A, because it means they lost power after fighting for so long, and B, it means what will happen is what has happened all over the world. It means the United States and European countries flood the country with foreign money, and they use it to overturn elections. Right. I mean, I am pro-democracy, but I mean, to criticize, China in 1949, by the standards of the 21st century is just it's unrealistic. It's unrealistic. And when you look at the amount of people they pulled out of poverty, the amount of people they pulled out of superstition, the amount of people that they taught, hygiene and nutrition and a centralized economy and centralized planning in terms of getting people food, clothing. I think at that point, I think that trumps democracy. What's happening now in China is a little bit different. Right? We had Bauman and VJ on a couple of weeks ago, and they said there's a lot of local democracy in China. Right? China is not 1930s Russia. That's not the case. Right? So they're an imperfect country. So are we. They have their flaws. So do we. But I'm not going to disparage the accomplishments of China, and they owe that to Vladimir Lenin and Karl Marx. They owe not obviously not all that, but in terms of an ideology, like they did the fighting themselves, right? But in terms of governing ideology and wanting to pull people out of poverty, they did it. It was Mao that flipped Marx on his head.
Yeah, I mean, if Marx started the conversation, and it is where it is, but so much of what he wrote, and just before we bring in our guests tonight, and get into some modern day political talk, I just it's Marx's birthday. He would have been 203 years old today. Go Google some quotes, check out an audiobook like I do, or if you do sit down and read, it's definitely it's something you got to take in if you're going to consider yourself, I think, an activist or a radical or any kind of person who wants to change this system, because and because it's a different point of view, and it's just far too relevant today, even though, some of it was written, during the times of slavery in our country. And you want to think about, a voice for liberation. Here was a guy writing, to overthrow the entire capitalist system at a time when America was still, struggling with the slavery issue here. So, I mean, he was ahead of his time, and it's a dude that needs to be studied if you're gonna.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even just about economics, right? You could discuss Marx and not even talk about economics. You could talk about Marx's role in sociology, right, as just a system of critique. And if we're talking about, if you want to talk about economics, obviously we can talk about Marxism in terms of criticizing that, but we could, just Marxist theories in social science. Marx is everywhere. We're not getting rid of Karl Marx. I got into it with a conspiracy theorist, some dopey Jordan Peterson supporter, and he just kept going on about every year they had another billion lives to the loss to communism. Yeah. And it's like, don't you know communism killed a bajillion gazillion people? And it's like, no, dude. I mean, look, if you want to consider yourself and this is what I was trying to tell him. And it was with these people, it's well, Marxism killed all these people. It's do you want to go to college and study political science and sociology and economics? race relations. If you want to do these things, you're going to have to talk. You're going to have to read Marx, right? It's like when I was in graduate school, we had to read Thucydides because Thucydides is relevant in international relations. Well, if you want to talk politics, if you want to talk about criticizing political systems, economic systems, arbitrary authority, you're going to have to read Karl Marx. And anti-Marxism is in reality anti-intellectualism.
I agree.
Because
And
he's a bridge you're going to have to cross. Whether you love him or hate him, he's a bridge you're going to have to cross if you want to consider yourself well-read.
I love him. I love him. I still, I'm sitting here scrolling. We said let's pull out some quotes and stuff. And
I'm not really the big Marxist scholar.
I am hard pressed to find a favorite quote. So much of it is inspirational. So much of it is insightful. So much of it defines, struggle.
I got a couple quotes here
for power. But I'm going to give you one because, I saw labor. I saw the word labor and I stopped there. But does wage labor create any property for the laborer? Not a bit. It creates capital. That kind of property which exploits wage labor and which cannot increase except upon the condition of begetting a new supply of wage labor for fresh exploitation. Property in its present form is based on the antagonism of capital and wage labor. So, what Marx talks about, aside from just defining, proletariat and bourgeoisie, but he also talks about the struggle that takes place between those classes and why the elimination of those classes would create a better society. But Christian, you had some quotes. Go ahead.
Well, I say my favorite quote is probably his most famous, which is he says that religion is the opiate of the masses, right? Like I grew up in a house that was nominally Christian, but it was kind of more like, I guess like irreligious. Not that my parents were non-believers, but I've become an atheist myself. And I think it gets a little easy dunking on some of these religious types, but for me, and I said this to Jennifer last week, as a man of color in the United States, I think that liberation for people of color begins with ditching the religion of the colonizer, right? I mean, Christianity is the religion of the Middle East that the Romans took on because they thought it would help them out. And then it just spread to the rest of the world. I mean, it just, for me, any belief system that tells people, especially we're thinking 19th century in the time of Karl Marx, any belief system that tells people suffering is okay because you're going to be rewarded in mystical afterlife, to me, I think that's downright criminal.
We're going to have to get into Rome, man. We're going to have to get into Rome. You brought up Rome and some of this stuff.
I could talk about Rome. I got my Lego Romans up there.
That's not the full quote, though. That's not what he said.
Well, I mean, that's what he said, but there was more to the quote. Yeah,
there was. You want to hear the full quote because it changes the meaning of the quote. Because I know what you're saying, and so your point isn't invalid taken alone. Because I understand, but actually, his full quote, because I knew it wasn't the full one, so I did look it up real quick. Religion is the sigh of the oppressed creature, the heart of the heartless world, and the soul of soulless conditions. It is the opium of the people. So what he was, he wasn't really putting it down as much as he was saying that these horrible conditions are creating these compassionate people, which I get into stuff with Rome and stuff with you some other time. But it is a good quote. Either way you interpret it, I think that's what's great about Marx. All right, we got to do like a commercial here. I got to pull up some music, and I'm like all behind and everything. I told Tiffany we were getting here early, and now I'm getting.
I didn't realize how fast time was going by. Go ahead, let's do it. Those ads.
Okay.
NJRevolutionRadio.com/donate.
We're a couple of lefties. We started talking about old dead communists. Would you expect?
Old dead kind. Now we got to ask for money.
All right, let me get some. I got to get some commercial music.
NJRevolutionRadio.com/donate. People, if you can donate, that we'd really appreciate it. Get the word out, right. If you can give a lot of money, that's great. If you can give a couple bucks, that's great too. If you can give us $10 and tell 10 people, that's great. If you can give us $5 and tell 5 people about us, that'd be great. Spread the word.
There you go. So thank you very much. Now that I got the music up, I don't know what else to say because Christian kind of just did the commercial. So we'll just listen to the music for a minute.
Well, feel free to join the editorial board too. Get involved in the comments. Any Karl Marx quotes that you people out there like? Does anybody have a favorite Karl Marx quote?
Come on in. We'll have an editorial board meeting about it. We'll sit there and we'll discuss.
Speaking of
Karl
Rome, though, if
Marx.
anyone likes,
Oh, you know what? We could watch. We got to watch.
What's that?
We mentioned in the pre-show that if you haven't watched the young Karl Marx,
I got to watch that. I totally forgot about that. I think that came out like a year
it's great.
ago, and then like Virus came out, and I totally forgot about it.
Brings a lot of stuff to life that you read about. So we've spent enough time on Marx today. But yes, the young Marx, and maybe one of these months we'll review that with our editorial board. Check out our website, www.njrevolutionradio.com. Like Christian said, you can join our editorial board. You can make a donation. Check out the IDAVOX report and all our special reports, including mental health and activism, stuff on political cults, and all kinds of other things from njrevolutionradio.com. That's the home of Revolution Radio. You can also shop Commizon. No More Measles, a book on how vaccines can save everybody from preventable diseases, is on there. It's only $3.99 for a PDF download, and it helps us out. So check out commizon.com. You can also go there through the njrevolutionradio.com website. So thanks a lot again. We're going to bring in Tiffany Kaszuba from my home state of New Jersey. Been having a lot of home staters on lately. I think I'm breaking up just a little bit there as I do the intro, but I think we're live now. Hi, Tiffany. How are you?
Hey, Brian. I'm good. How are you?
Good. Thanks for joining us tonight. So, you and I talked a couple weeks ago about your personal experience, and a little bit about my dealings in Trenton and all that kind of stuff. So, we bonded over getting screwed over by some of the same types of people, and I know we even ran in some of the same circles a little bit, although we didn't really meet each other until just recently. But let's just start off with kind of an introduction. You are from New Jersey. Were you born and raised there, or?
Yep, I was born and raised in Jersey. I from Mattawan to Howell. I went to Red Bank Regional High School, Brookdale, Rutgers. So I was born and raised in New Jersey, and then left after college for a few years, working in Washington, D.C. as a government relations professional, advocating mostly for public health. So I love the vaccine shout out there.
There you go. We've done a lot of work here on Revolution Radio to encourage people to listen to what their doctors tell them to do. And if you got a genuine health concern, go talk to your doctor and see what they say, and then do what they tell you to do. So
don't go to YouTube.
Don't go to YouTube. YouTube is not. And most of the time, the doctor is going to tell you to get vaccinated. So please do that. But anyway, we talked about, so you're born and raised, you get into politics, you get into this kind of public advocacy work, government relations and all that. And you wind up wanting to run for Congress. I'm very familiar with Chris Smith, the guy in Congress who represents a place in New Jersey that he has never been to, I don't think. He lives in a different state. He's got an apartment. He's a no-show congressman, essentially, is what he is. So you decided to pick up the flag. Now, he's a Republican. You decided to try to run as a Democrat to challenge him. And then you wound up with this guy, Bill Robinson, on your campaign, who was known to stalk and harass women, has a horrible history, a well-known history, and there's a whole bunch of other people that are involved. And I wanted to give a little bit of background there, but you wind up forming an advocacy group now. And I do want to spend a lot of time, but the experience that kind of drove you into NJ Violet, how present is that still with you today as you kind of move forward? Are you still thinking about it like every day as you get on and do your blog, or is it something you've tried to leave behind as you plow forward and make positive change?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, it's developed, right? So there's the thing that happened on my campaign where I would argue this man was pushed onto my campaign by the party. And because of the line and all, I'm sure, issues that you guys have talked about in the past, I felt like there was very little I could do without threatening my own campaign. So when you say to carry it with me all the time, I'm still kind of living it, right? After I dropped from my campaign to call out this behavior, which didn't just happen to me, it happened to women going back year after year. When after I dropped, I was asked by Senator Gopal to co-chair this task force to prevent discrimination and harassment on campaigns going forward, to try to prevent the same kind of thing that happened to me from happening to other women. So that bill, S3399, hasn't moved yet. So part of my advocacy is still on that piece of legislation, and that's why I founded the MJ Violet. Was largely after being appointed to that task force, was very concerned with the legislation that was eventually put forward. It was not in line with my suggestions. So I founded the MJ Violet when I couldn't get my concerns heard by the media, and was kind of put in this position and then removed from having any voice about what happened with the legislation that I was supposed to help draft because this thing had happened to me. So it stays with me every day. I thought this issue was this small issue with this one guy who had an issue clearly with how he interacted with women. I thought it was just that, but as I've kind of gone step and step above, like now I'm working on the state level with state legislators, even outside Senator Gopal, to try to work on this. So it sticks with me because it's still ongoing. There was the initial stalking, there was the initial pushback from the party and the party not helping me. And then every time I've gone forward to try to take the next step forward, to go to the next people who could potentially help me, I've just had the same type of experience over and over with the gaslighting and the really no one trying to help me or help solve the issue.
So would you say it was more of like a one and done when they had you work on that bill? Do you think it was a way for them to kind of like appease you or sweep you under the rug? Like what was that? Because you said the bill right now, it hasn't really moved. Has there been any more outreach to you?
So I was asked the bill was eventually taken from my task force and given to Senator Weinberg, the Senate Majority Leader's bigger working group on harassment and misogyny overall in this state politics, not just on campaigns. Okay. My bill was specific to that. From the time I was appointed to the task force, I had the sense that it was my name. They wanted to use my name on this legislation to clear Senator Gopal's involvement in covering up for Bill Robinson. So I had always been under that understanding and seriously had to question myself on whether or not I even wanted to participate in that, but had decided at the time that it was really important that if there was going to be legislation and if Senator Gopal was going to get credit for being the bully who wrote the bullying policy, that I should at least be involved. I have a background in government relations. I was a lobbyist for 8 years before I ran for Congress. So I understand how to write legislation. I know where to look for resources when I want to improve the legislation. I brought together lawyers to help me, even outside of my task force, went and found my own lawyers to help me with the legislation. So, I mean, I've kind of always had that sense that I was being put in that position to kind of be like the sign off that everything's okay now. Tiffany's happy. We let her help write some legislation. And when I actually came back with real legislation and real complaints about the legislation that they were offering, it was, okay, now how do we shut her up?
What kind of complaints did you have with their legislation? And this is Weinberg's office you're dealing with at this point, or?
Yeah, Weinberg and Gopal and the New Jersey Coalition Against Sexual Assault was involved in this. They had their executive director had some very interesting comments about the legislation that I had drafted. So because I had so many concerns with their legislation, was not getting help from them as far as improving with, why am I forgetting? OLS, there we go. So the Office of Legislative Services, because I wasn't getting help with the language from them, I went and recruited 4 lawyers to help me draft legislation. The main differences between my legislation and what they put forward, one, the definition of sexual harassment that they put forward is very limited, and the definition that we use the most expansive, which is Title IX and then expanded on that. So we really had a much more complete definition. The language in their bill is very specific as to how it sets up investigations. My bill wouldn't have done that. It would have set it up more like an ethics investigation and introduced that kind of administrative procedure, but not necessarily, but not prescribe step by step what happens with the investigations or the, there is all these, there are deadlines in there that me and Jasmine Story, the woman who was harassed by before me, both had on the bill. So there's that. There's also the oversight of the office within ELEC. There's a lot of political appointments in that oversight of ELEC in their bill. So right, like the governor and the governor gets appointments, and NJ Casa gets appointments, and I'm trying to not use their names. The Senate president gets their appointments, right? And New Jersey's political culture is particularly corrupt. I've worked in other states. Yeah. And because of that corruption and with those people in that power, I can see the same kind of thing happen as what happens now, right? The people who have control over that office will make sure the findings get found the way that they want to. Just like now, the media reports the stories the way that, because that's who we're using right now, right? In lieu of there being this office to do these investigations, it's basically, if you can get the media to write about it, if the media is interested enough, maybe you get your story told and there's some repercussion for that politician. So my concern is there would be the same issue as like what I'm having right now going to the media, where a very small subset of people control most of what gets written in the media, in at least local papers and a paper that would have an interest in a story like mine.
What you're talking about, I've seen personally, and heard plenty of, good-hearted people who have gone to Trenton, all the way from, completely inexperienced people that just had a life event, such as, like the death of a child or a family member. So they went to Trenton to lobby for money to help prevent that from kind of accident from happening again. I can think of like a pontoon boat, some horrible accident where guy's kid was killed by a pontoon boat. So they passed some safety legislation, named it after his kid. And so you see a lot of that work in Trenton. And then all the way up to like professional lobbyists that are there every day and developing relationships with senators. What do you think is the biggest problem with making real change? Because I've seen good things happen, right? I've seen people go in and advocate for a decent cause and actually get something, but far too often so when it's a pontoon boat safety issue, okay, we can get that done. But when we're talking about stopping sexual harassment or, getting healthcare improved or, ending police violence and things like that, not so much really happens. And the change, I think we can agree is usually surface level and stuff just to make it look good. So it looks like you did something and maybe tweaked it a little better, but really didn't strike at the heart of the matter. What do you think is the problem there with developing, substantive change?
I mean, it's a complex problem, right? Right. A lot of the way politics is working right now, particularly, I keep saying particularly in New Jersey just because it's the worst I've ever seen anything, is the politicians are doing it for the press release. They want to be able to put out the press release that make their constituents feel good about what their representative is doing about, for example, police violence. But those representatives still need to go to the police unions and get money for their campaigns. I've been doing a lot of digging through elect filings and figuring out where people's money is coming from. And so sometimes they need to do enough to appease the voters and look like they're doing something, and just little enough that they can continue to raise money from the interest that would be against that action, right? So a lot of it is, and to be quite honest, talking about workers and laborers, most people who work 9 to 5 don't have time to dig into whether or not that senator is telling the truth about the impact that his bill is going to have. Because I mean, I did it professionally and I can't keep up with all the legislation that everybody's doing, and whether or not they're telling you the truth, we kind of assume that they are telling the truth. And when they don't tell the truth, it should be the media that holds them accountable, but we don't have that. I mean, at least in my situation, what I've seen is I haven't seen it happen, right? I joined this task force with the understanding that there might be a point at which I needed to publicly say, this bill won't work. I knew that it was a possibility that they want to do legislation that would actually prevent this from happening, right? Because if they did, well, first of all, there was never a statute of limitations included in the bill, which would open all of the, all of the elected officials in New Jersey up to complaints going back till whenever. So if you're concerned about the impact that bill is going to have on your friends, in the case of sexual harassment, right? I don't think that there are people in New Jersey politics, that there are establishment people in New Jersey politics that don't have a friend who has committed some type of sexual harassment that, if found out by the broader public, could potentially lose them their seat. We're seeing this in the LD 37 race with Gordon Johnson. I mean, there is very public information out there about allegations against him. The media drizzled it out a little bit, but there was a debate just the other night, and they don't press. That wasn't me. Like, there's no real holding of these people accountable. So right now the system's working for them. They don't want to put something in place that's going to break up their power, because if there's real allegations coming forward and there's real findings coming forward by a real investigatory body, the public might have some questions about how people have been covering up people for, in some cases, decades, for their bad behavior for decades.
What has the feedback been like from women? Democrat women? Have any Republican women reached out? Older women, younger women? What has it been like dealing with women on this issue? Women in power, women in party politics. Yeah.
Yeah,
obviously
you have to divide them, right? So like the women in power, it's been difficult. I mean, some of my biggest opponents to getting my story out have been women. And it's funny because when I started, that's not how I thought it was going to work either. I mean, of course, I've been in situations where women have hurt women when it comes to sexual harassment in my own career. Before I ran for Congress, I had those situations. But I mean, like, when Loretta Weinberg is going to work on your bill now. Awesome. Loretta Weinberg, famed feminist, is going to work on my bill now. I'm going to have an ally there. But when an activist went to ask her to actually sit down and meet with me, I was asked what I wanted. That she would meet with me, but first she wanted to know what it was that I wanted. And that my friend Jasmine should just build a coalition of women around her to protect her if the party's coming after her. And it's funny because, well, Loretta, who else would be in that coalition, right? You are Loretta Weinberg. You are the Senate Majority Leader. If this is happening to women on the county, I understand that that's not your county, but it is your state, and you should be the one signing up for that coalition. You already have a coalition. You could be helping us. And that's not like, so where do you want us to go? So there's been that experience. NJ Casa, we were working with them on the bill. At first, I was so happy. Thank God I get to work with Patricia Chappenhart in this piece of legislation, because she's the leader of NJ Casa and she's speaking up for women. And then as we went through the process, I started to feel whenever I wanted to speak up or fight for something, it was, well, Tiffany, not all survivors want to fight. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. All survivors don't have to. I'm here and I'm doing it, and I'm not going to hold back about this. The most poignant
I'm sorry you heard that. Can I ask you about that point before you move on? Because first of all, I'm sorry you heard that, because I think what she said to you was true. So I'm not sure what she said to you was meant to deflate you or to kind of like point out to you that most survivors don't want to fight, you know, because I think that's most people don't want to put up with the kind of bullshit that you've put up with, or that people, you know, across the spectrum of going into places of power and challenging them want to deal with. I mean, quite frankly, you know, look at what you've put up with, look at what, you know, and we've all, you know, we've had this experience of trying to put up with. Who in their right mind would want to put up with that, especially considering you're somebody that's dealing with trauma already to begin with. So I think that's the barrier. That's not an excuse. So I guess when I asked, like, how do we make real change? It's how do we let people like you, how do we get people, you know, you to have a real voice? And when you have somebody in power, you know, like Loretta, and the entire state of New Jersey is filled with Loretta Weinbergs. For those of you that don't understand the political scene in New Jersey, they simply don't care. They just don't care. They really don't. And it seems to me that I get too many stories of people walking in the door, and it's all about protecting the status quo and making sure that absolute scumbags like Vin Gopal can continue to climb the ladder, which I've never felt sleazier than I've felt than when I was in the same room as that stinking piece of shit, Vin Gopal. And CWA, the embarrassing fucking union that they are, sat there and listened to that scumbag talk down the minimum wage and explain how workers, you know, shouldn't make more money. And this was before the minimum wage was raised. And, you know, weakling cowards that they are, they endorsed him anyway. So, you know, you can see very well why that shit stain of a human being who's no higher on the evolutionary ladder than a virus is actually a state fucking senator. So for people to understand what she's been dealing with. So if you're a victim and you're a dude, why would you want to speak out? And I'm not sure what her point was when she said this. So getting back to my original why I jumped in here. Why do you speak out? Why are you continuing this struggle? Why are you different than, quite frankly, most survivors?
Yeah, I mean, so I wrote a blog about this on the NJ Violet to some degree, but right, this isn't my first experience with sexual harassment. Like, being stalked on my campaign is not the first time that I've run into this. When I started my campaign, I was running as a rape survivor. I experienced a significant amount of sexual harassment in my career in Washington, D.C. It's part of the reason that I wanted to leave my position in Washington, part of the very many reasons that I decided to come home and run for office. For me, it's just, I am too young and have too much to do in my life to allow the world to continue to exist the way that it does. I hope to have children someday, and if they're women, I want them to be able to go into politics and not feel I mean, even if they're men, of course, too, I don't want them to feel unsafe. It's just, this obviously is an issue that affects women at a higher rate, and it's part of the reason women aren't getting elected in New Jersey. I came back to run for Congress partially because of the wave of women who were running for office and getting elected. It seemed like we were starting to move past this, and we're not. And I'm a public health lobbyist by trade, right? Like, I should be working on COVID. I should be getting more money for all of making sure that how we spend money is right for public health, that we're preventing these things from happening in the future. But if women can't get elected because they have to literally deal with traumatic experiences every day while they're running, or even when they're just volunteering on a campaign, then how are we ever going to get that talent into our government? Like, it's not even just about me being sexually harassed. Like, I don't want to always have to run on sexual harassment. One day I'd like to talk about economics and public health and all of these other really important facets. But for me, like, my constant trauma is sexual harassment. I've been sexually assaulted, and I know it's holding back a lot of women. I know the impact it's had on me, fortunately, I've been in the mental health space. I used to lobby for the Society for Neuroscience and the American Brain Coalition. So for me, I'm very aware of my mental health and the impact that it's having on me, and can kind of work through that. And it's hard. Like, I'm happy that I have
Yeah,
those
no, I really do
resources, but like
appreciate.
other women aren't going to have that.
Yeah, no, thank you for putting up with it. I mean, it's very commendable, and I do wish one that we had more people with your strength and your will to go up against it. But also, I wish, I hope that we start getting a system where it's easier for people like you to speak out and to get real change. If it helps, I'll tell bad stories about Vingo Pal all day with you. By the way, oh God. Please,
But like, to the point of like CWA and stuff, right? It's not just CWA that felt bullied into endorsing Senator Gopal, right? Like, to me, this is enough. People need to be comfortable with changing their position on an individual when you learn new information about them. What Senator Gopal was covering up for Bill Robinson for years. Even to this day, he is actively working to make sure that my story is told in the media in a way that reflects best on him. And
what? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just saying, I think people with that information, right? Like, I understand why people were attracted to him in the beginning, why they supported him. But when you have this information, you know the behaviors that he's making, it's hard for me to understand how people continue to support him.
Yeah. What kind of support have you gotten for NJ Violet? Have you gotten any media attention at all? Has anybody come out and approached you? Any other lawmakers?
I've talked to a few survivors, honestly. I mean, the goal for me is to be able to tell these stories in a way that like survivors are comfortable with, and that tells honestly how the system protects it, right? Like, it's police violence. It's not about the one instance of police violence. It's about systemic, and what are the systems that protect that. And it's the same thing in this, right? The line is a good example. People can do this with women all day, because just don't give them the line, then they'll never get elected, and we don't have to worry about this ever going anywhere. I kind of went off on 10. Yeah.
No, I mean that's fine. I mean that's what we want you to be able to say your piece. I mean, if you are not getting your voice out there, that's why outlets like Revolution Radio exist, right? We exist because we are the alternative to the mainstream, because your voice and many other voices are not being heard. So thank you. And we commend you for speaking up. We commend you for the work you're doing, and thank you for sharing it with us here at Revolution Radio.
I don't want to compare our things, but there are parallels between, going to Trenton and getting burnt and then getting into blogging and media stuff. So I feel like you're still at a bit of a crossroads here. Like, you got a bit of a foot, and we talk some politics and stuff on the side, and even this conversation here has been into politics, but you've also got this blog. I scrolled it up on the screen. People can check it out if they'd like. It's thenjviolet.com. I'll spell that out for our podcast listeners. That's
Stay Flower.
ThenjViolet.com, and check that out. So you're blogging, and do you feel yourself getting pulled away from Trenton and the State House and the lobbying work, and more into this creative expression, organizing, like you said, working with other victims and building a community? Do you see yourself staying? Because you can do both. I'm not saying they're mutually exclusive things, but I know, just speaking from personal experience, as I get sucked more into media, I like it because you can call Vin Gopal an asshole all you want, and nobody can do anything.
Yeah, I think I'm not 100% sure yet. I want to help survivors. I want to help address the political culture in New Jersey. I want to help campaigns that want to have a healthy campaign atmosphere, right? Like, I think there are a lot of good people who run for office who also just make mistakes because politics and they let politics intimidate them and make the wrong decision. So I want to help both educate. I want to help educate. I want to help train staff to be better advocates. I mean, in New Jersey, it's funny, I'm in Maryland right now, and the political, just like the canvassers, and it's much more reach out to the community and engage folks and make it about issues. And I want to see that for New Jersey. I want to see us elect people based on their values and their positions and their ability to solve problems for the state, instead of this spider web of political connections and not making and loyalties and not doing the right thing because it violates some loyalty. I want to be involved in fixing that. So part of it will be media. I'm not sure. I've kind of been playing around a little bit with going back to lobbying. I've been doing some work in health disparities recently. But like you, I mean, I like the media side. I like being able to say what I actually think instead of having to hold back based on politics. So
I'm gonna stay the devil on your left shoulder. How's that sound?
Sounds good.
All right.
I just got one last question for you, Tiffany. What advice would you give for I'm not going to say women. What advice would you give for people that want to get involved in politics or run for office? Because I don't want you to give a message just for women or just to men, but what advice would you give people who want to get involved in politics?
Know why you want to run and don't forget why you wanted to run in the first place, because there's going to be so many things that try to drag you to do the wrong thing or try to pull you away or make you forget, because it just sometimes becomes so stressful. It's too much. But if you always remember why you're running and who you are and stick to that, I think that's the only way to maintain your sanity and your soul. And I think when you do that, it also makes you unique, right? People appreciate that I tell the truth. I mean, they might not like the truth that I have to say, but there are very few people who question my, what's the word for it?
Integrity.
There are very few. They don't question whether or not I'm telling them the truth. They might not like that that's the truth, but I think that's really important and it's very valuable because there's so few people who do it that I think if we all just did that, we'd solve a lot more problems a lot more quickly. So it'd be good for you and everyone if everybody would just be who they are and stick to that.
We did plug your website again. That's thenjviolet.com. Anything else people should be aware of that they can reach out to you, support your work? Are we starting to do appearances yet? COVID's lifting. Phil is going to let people drink again. It's going to be a big part. Weed is legal. I'm going to be down there. Party. Where can we get together with? I mean, are you planning any events or what's kind of coming up for NJ Violet?
I haven't planned any events yet, but if you can follow, I mean, I have on the website that you can see my Instagram, Twitter, Facebook profile. So if I could get some followers on there, I'll make sure to get out any information as we roll it out. I've been unemployed for the last year and a half. COVID, having some trouble finding a position given my politics. So given all of that, I've been trying to balance getting the NJ Violet started up in that. So, but if people have ideas, if people just want, like, if there is anybody out there listening who is having a similar experience to what I had with sexual harassment in politics, I'm so happy to be a confidant, give you advice. It's so hard, and there's so many people who are going to ask you or tell you to just let it go because it's hard to fight. But if you're somebody who wants to speak up about it, I'm always happy to help talk to any survivors, male, female, or otherwise.
Yeah, we have a great network here at Revolution Radio. There's a lot of organizers and comrades out there that I know care about these issues way more than they care about politicians' reputations. And Tiffany, I want to thank you for coming on. I want to thank you for the work you've done. I know it's not easy to talk about this, but you've basically been going hard at it for a long time now. And I know it takes a lot of heart to do this kind of work. So thank you very much for coming on. And I hope we see you again on Revolution Radio real soon. Christian, before we go, anything else we need to know about the world of Christian Perez?
No, as of right now, things are pretty straight. You know what? If you can, reach out to me on Twitter. I'm really trying to get into this whole Twitter thing. I feel like an old man every time I'm on Twitter. Look me up at Perez Podcast on Twitter. Pick a fight with me. I don't know. Do something. Let's get this Twitter account moving. Tag me in something funny. But find me on Twitter at Perez Podcast. If you just want to chat, you can email me, perezpodcast@gmail.com. And I'm always here at New Jersey Revolution Radio or Revolution Radio. I gotta stop at that. And New Jersey Revolution Radio, the Revolution Radio. We'll get there.
It's still slipping out of me too, comrade. But I appreciate you and everything. Another great night. Hey, listen, it was a New Jersey-based show again. What can I say? But we got some stuff coming from all over the country. Florida, New Mexico's checking in, Portland. So don't worry, we're gonna get around. But you know, I did take a vacation. I went down. My fridge up here in Maine is stocked with pork roll now. So I'm kind of living a New Jersey life. You know, just I'm in Maine. What can I say? I like it up here though. It's all right. One of these days I got to discuss my new home with you guys. Thank you very much for tuning in. Thanks again to Tiffany. Thanks to Christian. Thanks to our writer, Leah. Thanks to our editorial board, all of you out there who are sharing and telling people to subscribe and kicking a few bucks. Go to www.njrevolutionradio.com. Tune into our live streams on Tuesday nights at 8 o'clock. It's the Ida Vox Report with Daryl Lamont Jenkins, myself, Christian Perez, and a whole host of artists and Antifa characters. It's a great show. Check it out. And then Wednesday nights, like it is tonight, only an hour before at 8 p.m., we do this. We come here, NJR Live, talk to grassroots activists, artists, and kind of recap the world of the proletariat. Happy birthday one more time, Karl Marx. Thank you. And till next week, this is Brian Powers. I want to remind everybody that the police can quit their jobs. Good night, everybody.